Hello friends, and welcome to another WSIB Truth Matters with Joe Machado, where I separate the truth from bullshit, facts from fiction, in plain English. Today, I'm going to talk about the third episode of our February money series. It'll apply to some of you, and I think it's information that you're going to appreciate. So anyway, let's get at it. And we're back. All right, friends. So this third episode of our February money series deals with a future economic loss benefit and the presumption clause. It may apply to, or it doesn't necessarily apply to all of you. It applies to individuals who had claim between January 1st, 1990 and December 31st, 1997. It is a law that is very specific to those claims. Even though it doesn't apply to everyone, when I started this channel, my commitment was to talk about benefits, the structure of benefits, legislation, and policies that affect injured workers over the last 50 years. So with the pre-1990 Acts, the Workers' Compensation Act in January of 1990, and the Workplace Safety and Insurance Act on January 1st, 1998. The future economic loss portion of benefits or structure of benefits that came into effect when Bill 162 was enacted back on January 1st, 1990. At that point, there were two, what they refer to as the dual award system, which is comprised of non-economic loss, which is still in effect to today, and the other portion being future economic loss. That structure of benefits was very different from the current structure of benefits under Bill 99 with loss of earnings benefits and non-economic loss. The issue of future economic loss benefits has been a source of concern for many over the years. A lot of people did not receive what they should have received when this legislation came into effect, and many went without. I'm certain that that many individuals didn't necessarily understand the legislation or appeal decisions that were made in their claims. But I do know that the Workplace Safety and Insurance Appeals Tribunal handled several thousand appeals dealing with this legislation. Well upwards of 8,000 and counting. The reason why I want to focus on the section that deals with the future economic loss of benefit, it's the benefit that would have had the more long-term financial consequences to an injured worker who was left with permanent restrictions as a result of the injury, and was not able to fully mitigate the wage loss that resulted from the injury. So in other words, whether you return to work with your pre-injury employer or you went to work for another employer, if you were not able to fully make up the loss of your earnings, in other words, that you were earning at the time of your injury, then the future economic loss of benefit would have been consequential for you. There are three key elements about the future economic loss benefit. The first one is what is referred to as the D1, or the determination of the benefit. So the very first determination. The second important element is the legislated review periods for the benefit. And then the last one is whether or not the lock-in of that benefit was able to account for your actual financial losses. And so I'm going to talk about those three. The first one is where the WSIB would do a determination, and that determination would involve vocational or labor market reentry services. It could have involved psychotraumatic or a psycho-vocational assessment, which is a very specific assessment to help determine potential suitable vocational goals. The WSIB, through labor market reentry services, would have looked at your skills, your academic background, your work experience, and the goal was to determine. At the time, they referred to it as a suitable employment or business. Now it's referred to as a suitable occupation. And that may or may not have involved your participation. It may or may not have been something that you were interested in, that you were kind of just forced into, or I would say aggressively encouraged to partake in. It may or may not have factored in all of your physical restrictions as a result of your injury. Nonetheless, that whole determination period was to ascertain that suitable employment or business and what that was going to pay you over the course of your claim. And what I mean over the course of your claim, I mean up until the day you reach 65. So, as I often tell our members and anyone who I speak to about WSIB benefits, when there's a claim, and you probably don't know this or even thought of it, but when there's a claim, the WSIB will make a forecast calculation of what they're on the hook to pay throughout the lifetime of a claim. So until you reach 65, and they're going to arrive at a very specific number. And in my opinion, they do everything they can to reduce that number. In other words, provide less services and benefits that you would normally be entitled to. And if you've watched any of my videos in this channel, you're going to see this as a running theme. And all of this is based on my experiences and the experiences of the paralegal firm that I built over the period of 30 years. Basically looking at what they do and having been involved in it on a day-to-day basis. So very much in tune with a lot of the strategies that they will affect in order to reduce that amount. But I'm not going to talk about that, at least not into a little bit later in this video. By determining that vocational goal, then the WSIB may provide, at the time they would have provided some retraining or not, some job search assistance for 3 months, sometimes up to 6 months or even more. Whether or not you were working at the end of the labor market reentry program, your benefits would have stopped or would have been reduced. They would have been reduced by what your escalated pre-injury earnings were and what that suitable employment or business earnings would yield for you. And they would adjust your benefits regardless of whether or not you had actually found a job. And this happened to hundreds, if not thousands, of people across the board. Because the WSIB's main motivation was to reduce the amount of benefits they were going to pay. And future economic loss can be a significant one, because if you're injured when you're 25, then you've got 35 years left in the workforce and 35 years that they have to continue to pay benefits. as I said before, there were a lot of appeals. My firm, we handled a significant number of appeals, and we succeeded at a lot of them, and we lost some, and that's normal. It's just the way things are. But the portion that I'm going to talk about today is the one where I believe a lot of individuals should have been paid full future economic loss to age 65. And weren't, and had the carpet pulled out from underneath them. The reason why I'm going to talk about this is because it was a piece of legislation that, in my opinion, started the process of causing injured workers to become financially vulnerable, and in many cases homeless. Because when you have the rug pulled out from underneath you and you depend on that money, and the WSIB isn't recognizing the factors that need to be recognized to determine whether or not you're actually employable, can have a very devastating impact, and it did. We were able to get a lot of our clients to full future economic loss, but that wasn't without significant and aggressive fighting, which is one of the reasons why the WSIB absolutely loathes me, but that's their problem, not mine. Talking about the second aspect of these benefits, that second element, the review periods. So after that determination, the WSIB will review your earnings 24 months later, look at what you're doing, whether you're working or not, and they can either stop your benefit or reduce it significantly by using. When they initially set up the suitable employment or business, on most cases, they would start with minimum wage or entry-level earnings. But at the 24-month, whether or not you were working or gained any experience or in the career, the chosen career, and most often they would reduce to average earnings or, in some cases, experienced. After that, there was the second and the last review, which was the 36-month review. They call it the R2 review. So the 24-month review is the R1 review, and the 36-month review is the R2 review. And in most cases, this is where people really got screwed, where many saw their small future economic loss benefit be reduced significantly or eliminated completely. One of the things that I remember from dealing with these claims, and I've been dealing with claims from pre-1990 injuries to everything else in between, is that at that time the WSIB outsourced their vocational rehabilitation department, which I thought was a huge mistake, probably the biggest mistake the WSIB ever made. And I discussed that with many VPs at the time and directors, and many of them actually agreed with me, because they pretty much lost control over how labor market reentry plans were being formulated, budgets, and accountability. Again, I'll preface that by saying that the WSIB isn't very accountable to begin with, but if they could lose any or have any less accountability, that was one of the strategies. Because what happened was they had a lot of these former vocational rehabilitation specialists or caseworkers another organization set up these companies that were going to provide these services to WSIB. They call them external service providers. And well, these external service providers, they had their ambition was to ensure that they were consistent with what the WSIB wanted, because their contracts depended on that. Otherwise, if they're not working within some of the guidelines that the WSIB has established during that period, which was very much to actually reduce benefits, then they would find themselves with less and less contracts and eventually not having a sustainable business. But I digress. So injured workers were up against a very significant problem, dealing with these external service providers that basically danced to the tune of the WSIB's drum, and then dealing with claims adjudicators who weren't considering all of the key factors that should be considered when determining employability for a worker with permanent restrictions. And so then this leads me to the main reason for this video, and that is full future economic loss or 100% future economic loss. It's one and the same. And one piece of legislation that we use frequently that was often overlooked by the WSIB or ignored when considering awarding a person full future economic loss benefits. I'll also say that for those of you who were watching this video and your claim was after January 1st, 1998, this was the time where deeming began. And a lot of you have probably heard this term. If you haven't, deeming is basically the WSIB, the way that I put it, is looking into their crystal ball and looking into the future of an injured worker and saying that they're going to be able to work in a job that they may or may not have any experience in, may or may not like, or whether or not there's even employment in their community in that job. But they're going to deem that, yes, you're able to work in that job, and they're going to assign a dollar figure that you're able to earn, and that's called deeming. And then once they deem the first time, others who review your claim, whether it be the R1 or R2 in FEL cases, or loss of earnings reviews, the annual reviews, and then a 72-month lock-in. Once the deeming starts, it just continues on from there unless you fight it. And we do have a class action that we're preparing for to fight the WSIB's deeming practices. But I'm not going to talk about that now because it's not something that has been confirmed as taking place in terms of whether or not the courts will actually certify the class. We do have a growing list of individuals who have signed on with our firm as wanting to be a part of that class action in the event that it actually goes forward. But the whole issue of full FEL or 100% FEL and this clause, it's called the presumption clause, the FEL presumption clause. And it's covered under policy 180402. I'm just going to put it up on the screen here just so you can see it. And it states, FEL presumption, when a worker is unable to return to pre-injury employment because of a work-related injury, disease, and is not working at the time of the initial future economic loss determination, the WSIB presumes, here's that key word, the WSIB presumes that the worker's future loss of earnings is work-related. However, this presumption can be disproven by an actual job offer, a suitable occupation, and or a worker's lack of cooperation in the medical rehabilitation program or a return to work activities program. So, focusing on that word or that term, presume. If you have restrictions as a result of your injury, and your doctors are stating that the totality of your restrictions pose a significant barrier to employment. And then they also consider, the WSIB, your earnings. Were you a high wage earner or a low wage earner? They look at your previous academic skills. They look at your previous work experiences and whether or not there are certain jobs in your community that could be identified as being suitable for you from a standpoint that they're available in your community. Oftentimes, in my experience, the WSIB would try to force you into a program, a retraining program or an upgrading program that with the end goal of increasing your skills to as close to as your pre-accident earnings, therefore minimizing how much they're going to pay, and once you're forced into this program, providing some but limited return or job search assistance to try and help you find a job in your community within one of those jobs that's selected. However, in order for you to be employable, and this is where the WSIB oftentimes screwed the worker, in my opinion, then first, all of your physical restrictions need to be taken into consideration, whether they're compensable or not. Even if you have concurrent restrictions from a non-compensable issue, they should consider your previous academic skills and work experience in terms of selecting or helping you to select a particular job that you're actually likely to succeed in. In other words, something that you have some of the skills, some of the interest, and are, again, it is within your restrictions. Keeping in mind that if you work mostly in a construction environment and trying to put you in an environment where you're going to work in an office or even in customer service, something that you don't like, have very little skills in, would likely never acquire those skills. But a lot of this was ignored. And forcing you into this program, even if job prospects in your community aren't significant, and there are other people already applying for those jobs that may have some experience, that may have better skills and more education than you do. And so you're going to be competing with these people. So now, overall, you have physical restrictions that may or may not be entirely accepted, pushed into a training program that you may or may not like or have the skills to do, and into a career that you have to compete with a lot of other more skilled, more experienced, and able-bodied individuals. And then if you decide at that point, going back to the 1990s, that you're not going to do that, and you have all of the support to provide the WSIB with a reasonable picture as to whether or not you would be successful in that, they just moved on ahead and in most cases went with the program, and if you didn't stick with the program, you would be deemed uncooperative, and they would reduce and stop your benefits, much like they do today. However, assuming that you go through all of that You struggle through school, you do manage to pass, just barely. You get some retraining in some of their less credible training centers that they would send people to. And then you pound the pavement for months on end, in some cases years. And we handled cases like that, where the person was just looking. It was their full-time job to look for work. And the WSIB would eventually cut off their support. So no more job search support, no more retraining, nothing. In a lot of those cases, the person should have received full future economic loss, because as the WSIB stated under the presumption clause, if you're not able to find work, and one of the criteria that they have is the actual absence of a job offer. Well, if you're looking for work for 12 months and you can't find work, and you even expand your job search to communities around your community, and you're not able to find work, I think that in itself demonstrates that there's no job offer. And if there's no job offer, and you followed all of the process that they've laid out for you, then it shall be presumed that your wage loss is a result of your injury. Makes sense. So at the end of the day, a lot of individuals were cut off despite their best efforts to actually find a job. And they were left with nothing. They were left to fend for themselves when they met the criteria laid out in that presumption clause. And as I've said, we fought for a lot of our clients, and we actually encouraged them throughout the vocational rehabilitation or labor market reentry process to participate as best as they could, to always demonstrate cooperation unless their doctors totally disagreed with it, but weren't able to find work. And then if we didn't fight for them, they would have nothing. And I'm sure some of you found yourself in this situation. So, full fel is something that can be argued for. Full fel is something that was allowed in a lot of tribunal decisions. Full fel is something that was allowed even by claims adjudicators in the WSIB's Appeal Services Division. So, full fel is allowed. And if you meet that criteria, and if you put forth a proper argument, the WSIB may deny it, and the appeals officers may deny it, but the tribunal would certainly look at it very, very closely. Now, some of you are going to say, well, appeal time limits, I may have lost the right to appeal and all that. There are still some ways to try and address those issues, and we can help you with that through the reconsideration process, but it's all about how that reconsideration request is made, how much research and how well substantiated it is to argue the point for you. All right, friends. So I know it can be a little bit dull, this subject, but it is a very important subject because a lot of people got screwed during that process. And even if your benefits, if you didn't get a full fel and your benefits were reduced, there still may be a way to get that reversed. All right, friends. So, as always, I enjoyed spending this time with you and talking about this very important piece of legislation. This concludes my third episode of the February Money series. And so coming up next Monday, February 24th, is the fourth and last episode of this series, where I'm going to talk about pre-1990 pensions and Section 144, Section 147 for supplements. That there are some nuances of those benefits that for those of you who have claims before January 1st, 1990, you may be missing out on some money, and it can be pretty significant. All right, so you definitely want to tune into that video next Monday. All right, my friends, and if you're not a subscriber to the channel, I welcome you to become a subscriber. It's free, and you can help me to grow the channel so that I can reach every injured worker in this province and to let them know that there's help. And if you have any issues with your claim that you need hands-on help with, or guidance, or you need an appeal, by all means, visit WSIBsettlements.com. We do have the resources to help you, and we have a large network of lawyers, the largest network of lawyers and paralegals that are on our network to help address claims and appeals if necessary. All right, my friends, and as always, till the next time, take care.